Okay.
Flashback.
Okay, I'm done. And sure, my friends, without Dr. Fauci, we would not have that cultural beacon of a masterpiece, or for that matter, this one music. But listen, even though the idealization of Anthony Fauci gave us such incredible content to laugh at and mock at that very weird point of our lives, I am still going to die on the hill that maybe sometimes it can be bad to give the ugly guy a chance. Because yes, before you jump down my throats, that is exactly what happened with Anthony Fauci. And well, 4 years later, we can look back on the COVID era and make fun of things like Fauci and the celebrities making fools of themselves as they fall all over him. We are still dealing with the very real aftermath of COVID-19 and what Fauci encouraged our government to do. And newly released diary entries from Fauci point to one very little man's ego as the reason for it all. Now, before we dive into this story, I want to thank you guys so much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode today, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And of course, to stay up to date on everything we upload here on The Brad Cooper Show, make sure to ring that notification bell. Alrighty. So my friends, today is the day. Well, I guess it has been the day multiple times, but I feel like this really could be the day. Because once again, I think, maybe for the 8th time, Dr. Fauci will be testifying in front of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee over the origins of COVID-19. And I know what you guys might be thinking, like, who cares? At this point, you're rolling your eyes, going, nothing came from the last 7. What is going to change now? Well, something did change. We have some new content from Dr. Fauci. This time, Rand Paul, who has essentially dedicated himself to being a public hater of Anthony Fauci. He is not playing around. And I do not know how Fauci will slither his way out of this one, because Rand Paul found and released Anthony Fauci's diary. And TLDR, what you need to know. What Anthony Fauci said and thought in private, what he wrote in his cute little bedazzled pink purple sparkly diary was very, very different than what he was telling the public. Here are the main points, and then we'll get into my personal favorite part of his diary. So, one thing that you should note is that his private estimated COVID-19 death rate was much lower than what he told Congress only weeks later, obviously to try to fearmonger the American public and people in government. As early as February of 2020, so before the initial lockdowns, he privately acknowledged that the lab leak theory was credible. And this will probably be Rand Paul's main point of questioning today, because obviously the hearing is about the origins of COVID-19. And this is what Rand Paul had to say after he released that part of the diary. He said, Dr. Fauci's own diary, in his own words, shows that he knew the lab leak theory was credible from the very first few weeks of the pandemic. 10 out of 12 scientists on his call believed deliberate insertion was possible. He wrote that the wet market, aka Wuhan, was never the real source. Then he spent the next 2 years telling the American people the opposite and smearing anyone who disagreed as a conspiracy theorist. That is the definition of a cover-up. And just to drive this point home even further, here is a compilation of Fauci denying that theory just so that we are all refreshed. It likely jumped species from an animal reservoir into humans and now is spreading among humans. The mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump over species from an animal to a human. Are you calling for the closure of the wet markets? I think they should shut down those things right away. I mean, it boggles my mind, because what we are going through right now is a direct result of that. One thing I want you to notice as we go through this episode is that there are very few things that make Anthony Fauci Smile. Number 1, gloating about himself. Anthony Fauci, king of the world. That makes him smile. And number 2, shutting things down. In all of these clips, he's totally straight-faced. He is the serious scientist. He has come to save the United States, the world at large from COVID-19. And then Brian Kilmeade from Fox News, he says, should they shut down the wet market? And he goes, I mean, it's literally a meme. He's like, yes. And then you're going to see in his diary, he's talking about shutting down all of these places. I mean, the man is just titillated over the idea of shutting down the world. The only other thing other than himself that makes him smile. Anyway, moving on, but connected to that point of shutting things down. In his diary, he did brag about shutting down schools in NYC and in California. And the fact that they did that because of him. So, in this entry, he writes, I spoke with Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York City, and convinced him based on what I was saying publicly and my conversation tonight to close the NYC schools. He had already decided based on what I was saying on TV. I went on to tell him that he should close the bars and restaurants in NYC, and he said that he would base this on my recommendation. And then he goes to the conversation that he had somebody in California. This is somebody who worked for Gavin Newsom. And she said that based on my TV appearances today and yesterday, the governor has decided to close the schools in California. Of course, not his children's private school, as well as the bars and restaurants, but of course, not the Michelin star restaurant, where Gavin Newsom and his friends would have private dinners. Isn't that right? I'm getting angry all over again. That was the most screwed up time of our lives. We all missed 2 years of life. I missed the second half of my college experience. Young children missed going to school for the first couple of years. Depression skyrocketed. Anxiety skyrocketed. Suicidal ideation in young people skyrocketed. And this man is sitting here gloating in his little diary about how he is shutting down the economy. The people that he's communicating with, people that he's on TV with, that he's convincing they faced no ramifications. Their personal lives were totally unimpacted. And actually, for people like Anthony Fauci, he profited. He benefited. We are going to talk about that later, all of the things that just made him smile. Anyway, moving on. The reason why I read that diary entry to you is because publicly, at the time, on television, he denied any involvement in closing those schools. Just watch. They always come back and say Fauci was responsible for closing schools. I had nothing to do. I mean, let's get down to the facts. Let's get down to the facts. I had nothing to do with it other than the fact that I went on TV and told everybody that they should, and that all of the amazing mayors and governors were listening to me. I've had it. I literally have had it. But, my friends, we have more to discuss. Now, again, going in terms of what he said privately versus what he said publicly, he also admitted, crazy idea, that the vaccines might not be 100% effective. And that, saying that, acknowledging that to the American public might hurt their efforts to mandate them. I want you to listen to that again. We should not be honest with the American people about these vaccines, about the fact that they really aren't 100% effective, because that could stop us from being able to mandate that they all take something that is not actually effective. So, this entry is from August of 2022, and he's talking about more drama with regard to the CDC. After much going back and forth between the CDC and the other docs, including me, and blah 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 blah, we thought we had gotten them pulled back from making the statement that the vaccines were not effective at all in preventing infection transmission. The reason this is an issue is that if they came out with that statement, which in fact is not entirely true, since there is some degree, quote, some degree of modest but declining protection, as you would expect. So he is saying they are not 100% effective. He is acknowledging that in his own diary, at most modest protection, but that modest protection is actually declining. So he said, then this would conflict with the statement and the effort of recommending the people get their updated vaccine in September. In addition, it would undermine the DOJ's efforts at mandates for vaccines under circumstances. So obviously, we have to lie to the American public because we want them to take the shot. We want them to believe and trust us. We want to make them fearful and indebted to us and make them take this thing that actually might not protect them. Now, on top of that, just to drive that point home even more, to show the extent of what he knew and how he was lying to us a year before in an entry. So this entry was in November 17th of 2021. He acknowledges, back in 2021, a year before that other one, that people were still getting infected even with the vaccine and that maybe vaccine requirements, requiring vaccine cards and proofs, all of these things that he worked so hard to get into place and to protect, that maybe they weren't actually helping. Alex Berenson posted this entry and he said, Fauci, November 17th, 2021. Quote, he wrote, I was nervous all night about having gotten infected in that very crowded restaurant despite the fact that vaccination proof was required to get in. I am well aware many people who are vaccinated are still getting infected, and that worried me a lot. With a normal human being, a normal doctor that cares about the health of his patients, of community, of civilization at large, you would see people continuing to get infected. You would see that the measures that you have encouraged being put into place, the little arrows on the ground as we walk through grocery stores, the masks that everybody including yourself had under their nose, the vaccine cards. You see that those are not working, that you yourself got infected and that you would be worried about that and then you would change course. But instead, as we saw a year later, he was actively trying to cover that up to push through an agenda. Why? To cover his own ass. So that he could continue being important in government, so that he could continue the press conferences, the magazine and interview requests, which we will talk about soon. Maybe that's why. I mean, it is so incredibly infuriating. All of this is so egregious. And like so many people that I saw talking about this online, I was looking through all of these entries, searching for something that might point to a bigger conspiracy, because it was just all so insane. Something twisted, brilliant, and maniacal that was, destroying our country. Kind of like outsourcing our farming. Which is why I am so proud to work with good ranchers. So, if there's one thing that my husband and I love, it is food. And meals are everything in our house. So, with our crazy schedules and having a new baby, getting a good dinner on the table can often be stressful, but good ranchers makes it easy. Good ranchers bridges the gap between American families and local farms by delivering 100% American-raised meat right to our doors. Now, last week, Alex literally ate one of their ribeyes every single day for lunch, to the point that we ran out of Good Ranchers meat. And in the evenings, I was making easy weeknight meals with their chicken and fillets. I marinated them earlier on in the week. It was so simple. And it all is so easy because it ships directly to my door and it's just sitting in our freezer ready to be made. From grass-fed beef to pasture-raised chicken, every box makes meal prep effortless while supporting hard-working American farmers. So, if you are ready to taste and feel the difference yourself, head on over to goodranchers.com for American Meat delivered. For a limited time, you can get $50 off your first Good Ranchers order, which means that you can build your own box starting as low as $129. Just visit goodranchers.com/Brett to get $50 off anything on their site. Remember that it's goodranchers.com/Brett for $50 off. You can also get double the free meat with every order on top of the $50 off when you start a subscription plan today. Remember that, double the discount. So, just go to goodranchers.com/Brett. Switch to American meat delivered now. Grand Canyon University does not settle for the status quo. They shatter it with academically rigorous, industry-driven programs that are built to move at the speed of relevance with practical skills, career readiness, and opportunity for every type of learner. Recognized for excellence in academics and in campus life, GCU's vibrant, welcoming campus was actually ranked in the top 20 best college campuses in the country by niche.com for 2026. And what I personally love so much about GCU is that they believe that education shouldn't just be some elite privilege, but an affordable path forward for all. Which is why this is amazing. They froze their tuition costs back in 2009. They have not changed since 2009. With some 380 programs, including 153 degree programs, 180 emphases, and 50-something certificate programs, hybrid, online, and in-person options, there is truly something for every type of student. Grounded in Christian truth, GCU works to empower the next generation to lead with integrity, to serve with purpose, and help transform their communities and build a future that matters. Certainly, the opposite of what we are seeing with Anthony Fauci. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, I urge you to take action and find your purpose. Today at GCU. It is private, it's Christian, it's affordable, it's non-profit. Visit gcu.edu to learn more. Again, that's gcu.edu to learn more. All right, now, back to the point with me trying to look for something that was so sinister and maniacal, like there was a bigger plan in place. I didn't find that. Instead, what I found was just the musings and ramblings of an egotistical man who allowed his ego, not the science, not what was best for humanity and the country, to drive his work and his recommendations. Tom Elliott on X tweeted about this, and he said, after spending the last 48 hours poring over Fauci's personal ramblings, my main takeaway is that he's just not that smart. I suspected that there would be more private acknowledgements that the whole thing was being intentionally sensationalized, but he seems to have legitimately believed that COVID was a terrifying global pandemic that was being narrowly kept at bay thanks to clever policies like social distancing, cheap masks, and experimental mRNA drugs. When confronted with facts proving the opposite, he simply moved his focus to other topics that he found more interesting, usually Tony Fauci. Nowhere in these 1,000+ pages have I discovered a single thought-provoking or even halfway interesting set of ideas. It is just a catalogue of his adulterations and petty squabbles with anyone not under his spell. The writing itself is sloppy, ungrammatical, and error-ridden. The only topic he seems to approach like a professional scientist is how to get booked on Meet the Press. And guys, that's just like the most perfect tweet that I have read as I have been watching all of this unfold online, and Tom simply could not be more accurate. Like, guys, this man writes in his diary like a blonde 16-year-old girl from a 90s rom-com. The obsession with himself and his fame are truly the best and most illuminating parts of these documents. I just want you to listen to this because, again, I think it shows you his motivation for everything that he did. It was not science, was not protecting the American people, it was glorifying himself. Tony Fauci, just listen to this. So, for example, in May of 2020, So this was soon after lockdown started. He wrote, big front page article about me appeared in the Washington Post, very flattering. The situation with my national and international fame is explosive and really unimaginable. It is not hyperbolic to say that I am the most famous and talked about person in the country and one of the most recognizable persons in the world. Countless profiles on me in multiple media. In another entry, he says, for better or worse, I am becoming an international celebrity. Calls from all over the world. He goes on and he says, POTA seems to be enamored of me even though I am taking the spotlight away from him. We are developing a very unique and interesting relationship. The entire Secret Service Corps is coming over to